All right, y'all. Good afternoon. Welcome back to English 300. This is the assignment for week 2. I'm asking you to do a keyword analysis and to practice your close reading skills with a series of poems. So, week 1, we did short stories, and we're going to investigate a different genre this week with 4 different poems that range across 19th and 20th century American and British, Irish literature. So one of the things I noticed with reading through some of your primary posts was that they were really great ideas. We need to do a lot more work with the text itself, though. Anytime you make a claim about a text, you have to support that with evidence from that text. So if you think about if you're in a science class or something like that and you want to make a claim, you normally would cite some sort of data. Well, our data, when we're writing about poetry or novels or short stories or graphic novels, is a really kind of close reading or an analysis of the text. And that takes the form of analyzing the particular language. Why did the author choose these words? Why did the author choose to arrange the words the way that they did? Why are certain words or sounds repeated? And how do those sort of formal devices contribute to the overall argument that you're trying to make about the text? So this exercise this week, this kind of keyword analysis, should really get your close reading skills up to that next level. So I want to look at the assignment, which, so for this week, write about one of our 4 poems. You'll be doing a keyword essay, and I'll show you how you might approach this through Edward Arlington Robinson's Richard Cory poem. You will need to be able to access the university library and our databases. So have your ULink password and username handy. This is the same username and password you use to check your grades or pay your bills, those things. So it should be easy for you to do that. So for this week, read all 4 poems, obviously. Read them a few times, and then choose one that you think you want to work with. And read it as many times as you can. Whenever I'm writing about a poem or a piece of fiction, I like to read it at least 3 or 4 times. And the parts that I really want to do work with, the parts that I really want to analyze, I try to memorize. I read it out loud. I read it out loud different ways, just so I know what are all the possible ways that this could be performed, that this could be interpreted. And because oftentimes when you read something, you will stress certain words, or you'll find certain things interesting on one reading that you didn't on the last reading. So it really pays off to read these texts as many times as possible. As you're reading it, try to locate a term or several terms that you think are really important to the meaning of that poem. And then what we're going to do is to use the Oxford English Dictionary, which is the best dictionary in the English language, to determine the precise meaning of those terms and to use those meanings as part of your argument about some underlying or larger message or theme that this poem is trying to communicate, right? So make sure you do quote and analyze the texts. Make sure that's a prominent part of your post, right? So we're going to locate keywords, right? As you read, pay attention to what's most important. Sometimes a word will be repeated. Sometimes the author will do you a favor and kind of tell you what's the most important word. So anytime the author chooses a word to say over and over again, you know that author's telling you to pay attention to this. But often it's a word that if you took it away, it would radically change the meaning of the text, right? So when an author writes something, they often do it very, very intentionally. There is a great deal of effort that goes into choosing the precise words, the precise word order, and they're intended to have a sort of effect on the audience. Now, the author's not always in control of those effects, of course, but there is a kind of precision that goes into literary writing that makes this kind of analysis possible. So you might also think about the large themes in the text and which words specifically relate to those themes. So I'll try to model for you my process when I read a poem through Richard Cory. And I'll read it out loud, and I'll tell you some things about how to read poetry if you're not familiar with it. You'll notice that at each line ends with some sort of piece of punctuation, except one line in the third stanza. These are called end stops, and whenever you see a piece of punctuation at the end of a line, you should stop If you don't see something at the end of the line, like this line here, these two lines are what's called enjambed, and you are meant to keep reading between them. And these are one of the things that I was talking about earlier, that it's most writing is very, very intentional, right? And Edward Arlington Robinson wanted us to read these lines in a particular way, and that's why he did the punctuation the way that he did. Each of these units are called stanzas, right? So there are 4 stanzas here. There are 4, 8, 12, 16 lines. It rhymes. So the rhyme scheme, town rhymes with crown, him and slim rhyme, arrayed, said. If you this is an English author, so if you think it with that kind of accent, I'm not going to do it because I don't want to sound ridiculous. But if you think about that, it rhymes: talked, walked, king, thing, grace, place, light, night, bread, head. So this rhyme scheme is called A, B, C, D, C, D, right? Because the A's rhyme here and the B's rhyme, and then you would do C, D, etc., etc. You don't have to do that. I'm just telling you in case it's useful as you are making your argument about the poem. So I'll read this once out loud for you, just to get a sense of how I read it, what the rhythm is, and then we'll go on to talk about how to find a keyword. So whenever Richard Cory went downtown, we people on the pavement looked at him. He was a gentleman from soul to crown, clean-favored and imperially slim. And he was always quietly arrayed, and he was always human when he talked, but still he fluttered pauses when he said good morning, and he glittered when he walked. And he was rich, yes, richer than a king, and admirably schooled in every grace. In fine, we thought that he was everything to make us wish that we were in his place. So on we worked, and waited for the light, and went without the meat, and cursed the bread, and Richard Cory, one calm summer night, went home and put a bullet through his head. Now this poem has a surprising reversal at the end. When the poem starts, the attitude towards Richard Cory is much different than the presumed suicide at the end of the poem. And it's the kind of poem that rewards multiple readings. If you read it over and over again, you'll start to notice how carefully Robinson really tells us things about Richard Cory and about the people's attitude. So we have an implied narrator. There's not speech necessarily. There's not quotation marks. But we have a narrator, and it's really interesting because the narrator is plural. We people on the pavement looked at him. So there's two groups of people at least, right? Well, one group of people, the people on the pavement, and then you have Richard Cory. The people on the pavement live downtown. Richard Cory does not live downtown. He lives somewhere else, right? He is a gentleman. He is clean-favored, imperially slim. We'll talk about what those words mean as we look into the Oxford English Dictionary in just a moment. So as you read this poem, or whichever poem you choose, you want to try to get a sense of these big ideas, like who is the narrator? Who is the subject? What are the big themes here? What are the setting? Anything that can kind of give you a sense, a way into understanding the poem. And the way I'm going to suggest that you try to find your themes your keywords, is by looking at the big themes, right? So what are the themes here? A theme is an underlying message or subject or topic in a work of art, right? And it usually addresses something about what it is to be a human being. And I know that sounds kind of fuzzy and big, but there are lots of weird things about being alive that poetry can tell us about that a lot of other disciplines kind of struggle to do, I think. And sorry about that. My dogs were upset at something outside. But there's a lot of things that poetry can do can tell us about what it is to be a human, what it is to live in a world that's really kind of hard to live in a lot of times. So many of the themes we have here, I think, are jealousy, we have community, we have death, obviously, we have loss, and there's a bunch of other ones. But I want to focus on jealousy. And so I think that's a big theme here. And one of the words I want to focus on is the word imperial. That's a word that isn't particularly common in the 2020 necessarily, but it's an important word with a really deep history and a really problematic history. So what we're going to do is we're going to go to the OED and search for our keywords, right? So if you pick up if you go to the library website, library.louisville.edu, it will take you to a place that looks like this. If you scroll down a little bit and go to all databases, A through Z on the left, and then you go to O, because it's Oxford English Dictionary. You click on the Oxford English Dictionary. Now, if you're at home, the next step you'll see, it'll ask you to log on with your Ulink credentials. So please do that. And then it should take you right back here, right? So I want to look up the word imperial. And I want to see what are the range of definitions for imperial. Now, there's a lot of stuff at the top where you can look at that if you want. It'll show you how to say it. It'll show you the etymology or the history of that word. It tells you it's an adjective. And it has a bunch of senses, right? And some words will have 50 senses or ways or things that it might mean, right? So of or relating or belonging to an empire. So imperial comes from the same word as empire. I don't think this has to do with the ancient Roman Empire, the Holy Roman Empire, so I'm going to keep moving, right? So sense 2, of or relating to a sovereign state in which its independence and important ranks with empire. Well, maybe that has to do. Maybe Richard Cory is some sort of dignitary. Maybe he's a mayor or something like that. But the poem doesn't really tell us that. So we'd have to really kind of stretch to get there. So I think that may be an interesting possibility, but I don't see it here. Of or relating to parliament, legislation, government, taxation. Again, maybe, but I'm not so sure that's what's going on here. Designating relate to a policy, institution, company. Again, no. Senses relating to an emperor. Okay. Of the nature or rank of an emperor or supreme ruler, ruling, commanding, supreme in authority. That could be something. Having a commanding quality or demeanor or aspect. A demeanor is just the kind of way you present yourself to the world. Majestic, august, exalted. Okay, that's something that I think maybe the poem's playing with. And then the next one, assuming or affecting a commanding character or manner, domineering, imperious. That too could be it. Befitting an emperor or supreme ruler, of special excellence, magnificent, exceedingly fine, or grand, right? So these are all various meanings, and you can keep going. This one talks about color, relating to an emperor, and then there's a bunch more that has to do with the Holy Roman Empire and things like that. I don't think that that's what's going on in the poem, so I'm going to go senses 5 and 6. A commanding quality, demeanor, august, exalted, majestic. Our word august comes from Caesar Augustus, right? So if you August in a adjective means someone that's really respected. Or sense 6, befitting an emperor or supreme ruler, of special excellence, etc. So I get the sense that when the poem says that Richard Cory is imperially slim, it's doing something with the social difference between the people in the pavement and Richard Cory. So what are some other related words to imperial, I think? We have line 2, people in the pavement. We said he is a gentleman from soul to crown. And I think crown there can mean head, but it also is where the king's crown goes. The word king, grace, which is often related to rulers. And then the line about the meat or the bread, right? So these are all terms I think are related to the word imperial, which I'm going to argue is a really important part of the poem. So after you locate what you think your important word is, I might argue that the narrator's attitude toward Richard Cory is not personal jealousy necessarily. It's explicitly related to economic class, right? So this person is putting himself and his community as being much different than Richard Cory. So we might use we might focus on the pronoun we. Why does it use we instead of I? Why the strict rhyme scheme? Right? Why does it rhyme so predictably the way it is? Why does it have a very kind of formal rhyme scheme? How should the audience feel about Richard Cory's suicide? When I first read this poem, thought, wow, that was really surprising. But then as I reread it, I think that perhaps the narrator is not saying it like a bad thing, but that, oh, well, yeah, he killed himself. And that's a thing that the narrator doesn't necessarily understand. Why somebody who is of such high class and has all the meat when no one else has meat and they're eating bread, it's surprising to them. And after this kind of analysis, has your attitude towards Richard Cory changed, right? In the beginning, if you were like, wow, I feel kind of sorry for that, if you reread it, does that change at all, right? So as you do your keyword analysis, think about what are the most important terms and then what you can do with those terms to make a bigger point about the poem. All right, thanks.